47 seconds. That's all it took for a 12-year-old blind dog to vanish through an open gate and into a world designed to destroy the vulnerable. His name was Max, and he couldn't see the streets that would kill him, couldn't see the 7 miles between lost and home, couldn't see anything except the ghost of Emma's face. The child who'd pressed her tears into his fur the night her mother abandoned them both. When that gate swung open, Max lost everything. And Emma? She collapsed under the oak tree, clutching his collar, making a sound that wasn't crying. It was the exact noise a child's faith makes when it shatters. What happened next would force veterinarians to rewrite medical reports and prove that some bonds don't follow the rules of biology or distance or death. Because Max was dying, blind, bleeding, and broken. But he was walking, one impossible step at a time, toward home. This is the story of love so pure it became navigation. 47 seconds. That's how long the gate stood open before Max's nose caught something wild, pulling him through like a fishing line hooked in his chest. He couldn't see the jasmine bush, couldn't see Emma's pink bicycle, couldn't see the yellow house shrinking behind him. His blind eyes saw only gray shadows in milk-white fog, but his paws kept moving until the familiar porch swing disappeared into the thundering roar of a world he'd never navigated alone. When he finally stopped, spinning in frantic circles on scorching pavement, the smell of home was gone. Erased. The heat rose from concrete in waves, baking into his paw pads until they screamed. A semi-truck roared past, and he slammed into a dumpster, metal crashing, his shoulder taking full impact. Something warm trickled down his leg. Blood mixed with city grime, painting his golden fur with rust. An elderly man's shadow fell across him for 3 seconds before moving on. Nobody stopped. Nobody bent down to touch the trembling animal, whose breath came in sharp, panicked gasps. But then a memory detonated behind his ribs. Emma's voice, barely a whisper. "Max, you're my brave boy. You're my always." The night her mother left, Emma had pressed her face into his neck and sobbed until she had no tears left, and Max had stayed perfectly still, her anchor in the storm. Now, standing 3 miles from home with blood on his paws and darkness in his eyes, Max lifted his muzzle toward a sky he couldn't see and released a sound that made a passing woman stop dead. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a whimper. It was the exact sound a heart makes when it refuses to stop beating. 3:47 p.m. Emma dropped her purple backpack on the porch and opened her mouth to call the name that always brought golden fur crashing toward her. "Max!" Nothing. The jasmine bush stood still. His water bowl sat untouched, a dead leaf floating on the surface. She called again, voice climbing higher, cracking. "Max!" The silence that answered wasn't empty, it was suffocating. When she saw the gate hanging open, swinging slightly like it was mocking her, something inside her chest just stopped. Not her heart. Something deeper. Her father found her collapsed in Max's favorite spot under the oak tree. She wasn't crying yet. She was making a sound he'd heard only once before. The night they told her grandpa wasn't coming home. A keening. Primal. The sound of a child's faith actively dying. "Emma!" He dropped to his knees beside her, and that's when he saw what she was holding, Max's collar. The old leather one, cracked from years. She was squeezing it so hard her knuckles had gone white, pressing it against her face, breathing in what was left of him. "He can't see, Daddy." The words came out broken. "He can't see and he doesn't know where we are and—" She couldn't finish. They searched until streetlights blinked on and Emma's voice disappeared completely, scraped raw from screaming his name. They printed 200 flyers. "Blind dog missing," the papers screamed in bold red letters, but the words felt like lies because Max wasn't just missing. He was Emma's miracle, the proof that something in her life could stay. At 11:34 p.m., her father carried her inside still wearing her shoes, still clutching that collar. "We'll find him tomorrow," he whispered, but his eyes said something different. Emma stared at her ceiling and whispered into darkness. "Max, if you can hear me, I'm coming. Please don't give up." But she didn't know that 7 miles away, Max had just collapsed under a bridge, his body shutting down. Max's eyes opened to gray nothing, but something was different. The concrete beneath him wasn't the worn porch where Emma's feet found him each morning. It was cold, jagged, painted with his own blood from the paw that had split open during the night. Above him, the bridge groaned under morning traffic, each vehicle sending tremors through his broken body. His tongue had swollen, his ribs pressed against hollowing skin. Somewhere in his mind, a voice whispered, "This is how dying starts." But then his nose caught something. Jasmine and cut grass and lavender soap. Home. It punched through his chest like a defibrillator, and Max's body did something that would make veterinarians argue for years. It moved. He lurched to his feet like something had yanked him upright by his soul. His legs screamed. His infected paw sent lightning bolts of agony up his leg with each step. But Max's nose was locked onto something invisible, something that blazed like a beacon in whatever mysterious realm dogs navigate when love becomes direction. He turned northeast. Not because he could see, not because he knew the way, because every cell in his body suddenly understood. Emma was that direction, and every second he wasn't moving toward her was a second closer to her forgetting how to hope. The first mile took 6 hours. 6 hours of walking into mailboxes he couldn't see, stumbling off curbs that materialized from nowhere, crossing intersections where horns blared and brakes shrieked. His paw left bloody prints on sidewalks that would later be photographed and shared online with captions like "Faith in Physical Form." By dusk, his legs had started to fail. Not giving up. Failing. The difference matters. He collapsed in front of a pharmacy, his chest heaving, and for 12 seconds he stayed down. But then a breeze shifted, carrying the faintest trace of jasmine lavender Emma, and Max's cloudy, useless eyes squeezed shut as if seeing something no one else could. He stood again. And the 3 people who witnessed it would later say they'd seen proof that love doesn't follow the rules of biology. 72 hours. That's how long a dog can survive without water before organs start eating themselves. Max had reached hour 68 when his body finally gave the command his brain had been refusing. Stop. The alley behind the Vietnamese restaurant smelled like star anise and rot, and his infected paw had swollen to twice its size, purple-black, leaking something thick and yellow. A delivery driver stepped over him at 6:47 a.m., close enough that Max felt boots on concrete, but the man's eyes never dropped. Max's breathing had become a wet rattle, each inhale catching on fluid drowning him from inside. His fever had spiked so high that Emma's face kept appearing in the gray fog, not memory but hallucination. He tried to lift his head toward her. Failed. And in that failure something whispered, "This is where your story ends." But at 7:13 a.m., the exact moment Emma was waking up screaming his name, a woman's Toyota hit a pothole 3 blocks away, sending coffee exploding across her dashboard. Sarah Chen cursed, yanked the wheel right, and ended up in an alley she'd never taken in 8 years of this commute. She was grabbing napkins when she heard it, breathing. The kind that sounds like someone's chest is asking permission for one more breath and getting denied. She found Max behind a dumpster, and the smell hit her first, infection, decay, the scent of a body shutting down. His eyes were open but seeing nothing, tongue gray-white and swollen. She dropped to her knees, and that's when she saw them. Numbers. Written in permanent marker on the skin beneath his matted fur. Someone had loved this animal enough to tattoo hope onto his body. The first number rang dead. The second rang once, twice, 3 times, and Sarah was about to hang up when a man's voice cracked through. "Hello." Not a greeting. A plea. She said 5 words. "I found a blind golden retriever." The sound that came back wasn't human. It was every prayer that had gone unanswered suddenly getting screamed back into the universe. "Where?" His voice splintered. "Where is he?" Sarah gave the address, and the line went dead because Emma's father was already running, already screaming for Emma to get in, already breaking every traffic law. What Sarah didn't know was that 16 minutes later, she'd see a little girl explode from a car and collapse beside Max's body, sobbing so hard no sound came out. Max's eye cracked open 1 millimeter, and in the gray fog of his dying vision, he saw a shadow that smelled like jasmine and home. His tail moved. Once. A single thump against concrete that said, "I kept my promise." The veterinarian's hands stopped moving at 11:47 p.m., hovering over Max's body like she'd forgotten how to finish the sentence her brain had started. His temperature read 94.3 degrees, hypothermic, borderline incompatible with life. "I need to be honest with you," she said, and Emma's father felt his daughter's hand squeeze his so hard he heard knuckles crack. "His kidneys are failing. The infection is systemic. Even if we do everything right." She couldn't finish because Emma had dropped to the floor, her face pressed against the metal exam table, whispering something the vet couldn't hear but felt in her bones. You promised you were my always." Then, at 11:53 p.m., his back leg twitched. Once. A single muscle spasm that could have been nerves misfiring or could have been something else. By 3:18 a.m., the impossible had started happening. Max's temperature climbed to 96.1. His heart found a steadier rhythm. When the vet inserted water into his mouth, his throat worked, a swallow so faint she almost missed it. But Emma saw it and released a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "He's fighting," the vet whispered, because she'd seen hundreds of animals die, and this one should have been next. Except his blind eyes had cracked open at 4:02 a.m. and locked onto Emma's face with such precision that the vet actually checked his chart to confirm he was blind. At 6:34 a.m., when sunrise turned the exam room gold, Max lifted his head 3 inches off the table. 3 inches. The difference between death and defiance. 21 days later, Max walked through the gate that had started this nightmare, and Emma stood in the doorway holding his old collar like a relic. His infected paw had healed into a twisted scar that made him limp, a permanent reminder of 7 miles walked blind. The veterinarians called it medically unprecedented. Emma didn't care about precedent. She cared that when Max's paws touched grass under the oak tree, he collapsed into his old spot and released a sigh so deep it sounded like he'd been holding his breath for 3 weeks. She lay beside him, her hand finding the scar on his paw, tracing it like reading Braille. "You came back," she whispered, and Max turned his blind eyes toward her voice, those cloudy eyes that had somehow navigated a city, a fever, and death itself to find her. His nose touched her cheek, and in that touch was every promise ever kept, every prayer ever answered, every impossible thing love makes possible. Max walked 7 miles blind because Emma's love was louder than his fear. But here's what should wreck you. How many times have you walked past your own miracle because it looked broken? That shelter dog with the mangled ear. Your neighbor who hasn't spoken to anyone in weeks. The kid at school everyone ignores. They're all Max blind, bleeding, praying someone notices they're still fighting. Maybe you're the 47 seconds that changes everything. Maybe there's an abandoned heart that will walk through hell just to find you, if you give them a reason to believe. If this story made your chest ache with hope, stay with us. Hit subscribe. Because next week, we're bringing you the 3-legged puppy who saved a veteran from suicide. We all need proof that broken things can be beautiful.